All right, so move on to the next segment. I'll be sharing my fight prediction for this weekend's fight taking place in the sport of boxing between Richardson Hitchens and Oscar Duarte. So this weekend in the sport of boxing, Richardson Hitchens will be defending his IBF super lightweight title against Oscar Duarte in the co-main event slot of the Mario Barrios and Ryan Garcia fight card. So these are the following storylines I have heading into this IBF championship fight. First storyline is, can Richardson Hitchens become the next big star in the sport of boxing? Now, we're seeing a lot of stars blossom and groom into big household names. Talk about Devin Haney. I'm talking about Shakur Stevenson. I'm talking about Bam Rodriguez. Now, 2 out of those 3 fighters I just mentioned are not knockout artists. And Richardson Hitchens is in the same category as a Devin Haney and Shakur Stevenson. A good polished boxer, but not a knockout artist. But you don't need knockouts to become a star if you're a real boxing fan, a real hardcore boxing fan. The boxing skills will make fans fall in love with their game. And I think Richardson Hitchens honestly has a bright future. He's undefeated, 20 professional victories in his boxing career, undefeated, and just picked up his biggest win of his boxing career, knocking out a former unified lightweight champion of George Kambosos. And Richardson Hitchens is only the second man in boxing to knock out George Kambosos. Of course, Vasily Lomachenko did it in his final professional fight back in 2024. Richardson Hitchens did it last year. So I think he's riding a wave of momentum. Plus, he defeated Liam Paro in his previous fight to win the IBF title. So Richardson Hitchens, in my opinion, is starting to gain all the momentum in the world. He's gaining a lot of confidence, wants the big fights. And you could get the big fights if you could get past one of your biggest tests in your boxing career in Oscar Duarte this weekend. He has to have a successful title defense, but we're going to see if a star can be born with this type of performance against Oscar Duarte. And next, can Oscar Duarte win his first world title in his boxing career? Now, Oscar Duarte is a name that a lot of people never heard of until he fought Ryan Garcia in the back end of 2023. But this guy is pretty good. Right now, I would say he's a B-plus fighter. I wouldn't say A- just yet. I think he's a B-plus fighter. 30 professional wins, a good pressure fighter, and has knockout power. And he's an underrated fighter, I think, at this stacked super lightweight division that's definitely picked up a lot of steam. I mean, you look at the champion, Shakur Stevenson, WBO champion, Gary Antoine Russell, that will also be on this card. That's the WBA champion. Who am I missing? Richardson Hitchens. Oh, and Dalton Smith, that's the WBC champion. So the division is definitely heating up. The champions are really good at this division, and there's a lot of good challengers at this division. But Oscar Duarte, I think he's an underrated fighter at this division. And we're going to see if he can win his first professional world title in his boxing career this weekend against Richardson Hitchens. But enough of the storylines. Let's get to the tail of the tape here. Tail of the tape for the fight, starting off with the challenger. Oscar Duarte has 30 victories, 2 losses, 1 draw to his boxing career. 23 victories coming away of knockout. Stands at 5'9" with a reach of 71 inches. Then I'm going to the champion, Richardson Hitchens. He's 20-0 in his boxing career, 8 victories coming away of knockout. Currently the reigning defending IBF super lightweight champion, stands at 5'10" with a reach of 74 inches. So I think the height and the reach goes in favor of the champion, Richardson Hitchens. We'll see if he can use the height and the reach to his advantage in this championship fight. Now, these are the following game plans that I have for these fighters to follow if they want to walk out of Vegas with that coveted IBF title. Starting off with the challenger, Oscar Duarte. Oscar Duarte has to fight coming forward. He has to be the aggressor, bring the fight to Richardson Hitchens, and he has to fight coming forward. Make Richardson Hitchens box off the back foot as much as possible. And he has to set the tone early with the aggressive style. Now, we know the aggressive Mexican boxing style, Canelo, Pitbull Cruz. You can go all the way to all the great Mexicans. All of them, in a way, fight similar. No disrespect, because I respect the boxing style, but they all fight similar with the aggressive boxing, Mexican boxing style fighting coming forward, making your opponent box off the back foot, and you're the aggressor. You're in the driver's seat, being in control of the fight. So I think he has to be the aggressor here, let the hands fly. But my thing is, watching Oscar Duarte over the last couple years, is being the aggressor, you got to learn how to cut the ring off. And I hope I hope in this training camp he learned how to cut the ring off, because if he could actually cut the ring off and make Richardson Hitchens fight in a certain angle in the boxing ring, like you got a chance to win this fight. But I think it all starts with being the aggressive, setting the tone, and letting the hands fly, landing punches and flurries, be a high volume puncher, work as much as possible, because you never know how these judges are scoring it in boxing nowadays. But he's got to cut the ring off well. Next game plan, land the power shots in the inside. Now, Oscar Duarte loves the fight in the inside with that aggressive boxing style that I just said a few moments ago. And he can break down, he's broken down his opponents in the past with the power shots. They don't respond well. Sometimes they don't want to box. Sometimes they just coast to the finish line. Sometimes they get knocked out. But I think if he's going to bring the fight to Richardson Hitchens, fighting in the inside is going to be very important. The power shots, mixing the uppercuts, the body shots, and the right-hand shots to slow down Richardson Hitchens and make him respect your power. And that can go a long way for you in this 12-round championship fight. And last but not least, high work rate. Now, this goes back to what I just said. High work rate, landing punches and flurries, and landing volume punches, because you never know how these judges are going to score it. Be very active. Be ready to fight for 12 rounds, not banking on a knockout win. He has to be very patient in the boxing ring. And I think the high work rate and being active could really help him in this fight against Richardson Hitchens and gain the momentum of the fight offensively. So those are the game plans that I have for Oscar Duarte. As for the champion, Richardson Hitchens, I think he's got to use the jab. Now, I kind of pointed to what I was going to a few moments ago in the beginning of this segment. I was talking about Devin Haney and Shakur. They're not knockout artists, but they're polished boxers. And I said this joke in the past. I like Richardson Hitchens, don't get me wrong, but I said this joke in the past on the podcast that Richardson Hitchens is a poor man's Devin Haney. And that's a good compliment in a way, because I think Richardson Hitchens is a similar boxer to Devin Haney. He uses the jab to push his opponents off of him, and I think he should do that. Use the jab to his advantage and keep Oscar Duarte an aggressive fighter off of him, using the jab, popping the jab. Every time you pop the jab, when Oscar Duarte is going to be coming to the inside, that could make him possibly respect power that Richardson Hitchens has, even though he's not a knockout artist. Just like Devin Haney, just like Shakur, they like to pop the jab. They're not knockout artists, but it's enough to make your opponents respect you and enough to do enough damage to win a boxing fight. So I think he should do that. And the jab, trust me, the jab will help him control the pace of the fight and keep Oscar Duarte off balance, because he doesn't have the best footwork. And when your opponent doesn't have the best footwork, you're off balance. Any shot can throw them off, and that could lead to you hurting your opponent, landing the knockdowns or the knockout. So the jab is going to be very important in this fight. Next, I think Richardson Hitchens needs to fight in different lateral movements. Now, this goes to my point. He has a huge advantage here in the footwork department. It's no secret that Oscar Duarte does not have the best footwork. I don't want to say very flat-footed, but compared to Richardson Hitchens, you could say he's very flat-footed. So Oscar is going to be coming in the inside using the power shots. So Richardson Hitchens fighting in different lateral movements, using the footwork to your advantage, avoiding the big shots. And when he's coming in, be alert defensively and catch him off balance and win the counter-punching battle. Because if you avoid the big shot, you land the counter-punches, your opponent's feet aren't balanced off rhythm, that could lead to Richardson Hitchens gaining momentum, gaining confidence as the fight goes on. Or Oscar Duarte possibly becoming frustrated and bailing on the game plan and just going for a knockout. So we'll see what happens. And last but not least, now this one is very important, because I think Oscar Duarte really does have a knockout puncher's chance. I think he could possibly win the fight, but he does have a really good chance at having a knockout puncher's chance. So he's got to be alert defensively. And I think Richardson Hitchens has to take away one of Oscar Duarte's best combinations, which is the 2-3 combinations, the power shots that he likes to shoot for. And Oscar likes to land those 2-3 power shots a lot in fights. So I think Richardson Hitchens needs to fight in the high guard and use his footwork to avoid the big shots. And I think he's going to have to fight in the inside at times, but if he can avoid the big shots, avoid wild exchanges in the inside, using his quick reflexes to get away, fighting the high guard. And again, that goes to the footwork. You pivoting away from your opponent that your opponent can't fight in a certain lateral movement to land the power shots, this could be a really key advantage for Richardson Hitchens heading to this IBF championship fight. But with that being said, I'm going to go with Richardson Hitchens to defeat Oscar Duarte by decision to retain his IBF super lightweight championship. Now, styles makes fights here, and I think Oscar Duarte has a knockout puncher's chance, but you can't really depend on that in a 12-round championship format like this. So I'm going with Richardson Hitchens, and I do believe he will get, at times in this fight, he will get clipped by Oscar Duarte's power shots. And I think he's going to feel the power, and that's going to test Richardson Hitchens to see where he's at moving forward when he wants to fight the bigger names and fight bigger competition at this division. But I do believe that Richardson Hitchens will make the adjustments and outbox Oscar Duarte in the later rounds to win this fight by decision. So I think Richardson Hitchens will be able to control the pace of the fight with the jab, fight in the high guard, be alert defensively to avoid the big shots. And if you're fighting the high guard to avoid the big shots, and you could possibly win the counter-punching battle. And that goes to my point I just said a few moments ago with Richardson Hitchens finding a different lateral movements, using the footwork. And he definitely has the bigger footwork advantage over Oscar Duarte. Like I said, I feel like he's flat-footed. But if your opponent with that Mexican boxing style, being the aggressor, he's trying to walk you down, you avoid the big shots, and your footwork is polished enough to win the counter-punching battle. You win the counter-punching battle, your footwork is polished enough to pivot out of different lateral movements. Your opponent can't hit you in different lateral movements. Richardson Hitchens can control the pace of the fight how he wants, avoid the big wild exchanges that could possibly happen on the inside, use the jab to his advantage. And I do believe that Oscar Duarte, if he can't land the power punch, is going to be very lost and very frustrated as the fight goes on. That's why I favor Richardson Hitchens, and I do believe he'll get the win by decision to retain his IBF super lightweight title. So that is my fight prediction for this weekend's fight between Richardson Hitchens and Oscar Duarte.